No, because for me, even every difficulty, every mistake, every failure is a lesson, and therefore it's an opportunity to do better.
So it hasn't been a lost decade in
No.
your view? Because that's the view of Cyril Ramaphosa, the current ANC president of South Africa. He called it a lost and wasted decade.
I don't agree.
But it isn't just the president who said that. Others have gone much further than him. The Nelson Mandela Foundation has talked about the systematic looting that has taken place in South Africa. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said as far back as 2011 that the ANC was, quote, worse than the apartheid government because he said, at least you were expecting it with the apartheid government. It's pretty damning.
It is, and I remember that moment when the bishop said that, and when we meet him, he doesn't really sound like that. I'm saying, Mehdi, wrong things have happened.
Yes.
People have done wrong things, but that doesn't mean it's all lost, it's all gloom.
The ANC will be remembered for fighting for racial equality.
Sure.
But in economic terms, when we talk about inequality, the World Bank says that South Africa today is the most unequal nation on earth. That's a pretty embarrassing title for your country to hold, isn't it?
I must say it is very harsh, but I wonder whether it's not an exaggeration. I really think that we must see both good and bad. It can be said by the World Bank is not God. And therefore, just because they've said it...
I mean, to be fair, it's not between God and the World Bank. It's like,
no, sure.
I mean, those are extremes. They are an institution that studies this stuff.
Sure.
I'm not sure they have some anti-South Africa agenda.
But they are human beings.
And your country came bottom.
They are human beings. I don't
So you don't accept their verdict, is what you're saying?
I don't believe so. And we must keep improving on what we discover is a weakness that we have.
And is corruption one of those big weaknesses?
Corruption is one of the reasons why we have the commission that is going on, where we are saying, let it all come out. Because we need to know what is wrong, how wrong it is, who did what.
You're acting like you were a passerby or an observer. You were in the thick of all of this.
No.
In the ANC, you were the chair, you were the Speaker in Parliament, you were the Deputy President. This happened on your watch, hence these questions. So, for example, back in 2017, your ANC colleague Praveen Gordhan was sacked as finance minister by then President Jacob Zuma. He said at the time 150 to 250 billion rand, or 11 to 15 billion US dollars, had been looted from the state. Why didn't you speak out at the time and join with him to call out that looting?
I was right there, Mehdi, and we were discussing these issues every day at that time. We were seized with them. That is why we decided we need for these things to be investigated, and we need for it to happen publicly in the open so that we get to know what exactly is the problem.
But you're implying that no one knew anything, that we're just discovering this now. The state capture, what's called state capture in South Africa, this idea that associates of the president and other powerful people took over utility companies, energy companies, state institutions, that happened in full view of everyone's eyes.
Actually not. Things were not happening in full view of everybody.
The finance minister disagreed with you.
There are many issues I'm learning for the first time in the past few months.
In terms of corruption?
In terms of how bad things were.
Okay. Something that happened that we don't need an investigation because there have been lots of investigations was the scandal involving then President Zuma's own estate, the Nkandla homestead, where nearly 23 million US dollars or 246 million rand of taxpayers' money was spent on what President Zuma described as security upgrades, which included a swimming pool and an amphitheater. I'm curious, what kind of security was the swimming pool providing the then president of South Africa?
Well, a minister was in charge of that investigation, and in his view, that was not a swimming pool.
This was the police minister, the president's
yes,
handpicked police minister. He put out a video to classical music in which he described the swimming pool as a fire prevention measure.
Yes, he did.
You accepted that? Seriously?
It's not up to me, Mehdi. It's not up to me.
I didn't say it was up to you. I said, did you agree with that assessment of I mean, this is serious stuff. We can laugh, but $23 million on pools and amphitheaters in a country where half the population lives on less than $5 a day. You accept that kind of excuse?
No, it's not a question of accepting or not accepting. Part of the challenge that we have is that part of that is actually government property, which was actually for purposes of ensuring that there are health facilities nearby for the president to be able to be looked after, or any of the staff.
In 2016, there was a landmark constitutional court ruling that said Jacob Zuma should pay some money back. It also ruled against the National Assembly that you were Speaker of, saying you would, quote, fail to fulfill its constitutional obligations to hold the president accountable. That's an indictment of you.
Yes.
You're the Speaker of Parliament.
It's not an indictment of an individual, because the individual actually does not determine the position that Parliament or the National Assembly does actually end up taking.
So case finally, was called Democratic Alliance versus Speaker of the National Assembly. Sure, that's you.
Because I am the leader, and therefore, on behalf of the institution, I become the person who is quoted.
Do you believe you were a neutral, impartial speaker?
I was.
Then why is it that you, as a neutral, impartial speaker, you had to apologize for calling an opposition leader, Julius Malema, a cockroach at an ANC rally? Is that a neutral, impartial term?
I used that term not in Parliament, so let's not...
Oh, so you were only neutral in Parliament. Once you stepped outside of Parliament...
I said that in a political context. I was in the Northwest...
So why did you apologize? You don't sound very apologetic today.
Because it was not correct for me to call another person a cockroach, whether they were...
I'm glad we can agree on that. Just looking forward, South Africa has a new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who claims to be determined to stamp out corruption, even though he himself has been accused of misleading Parliament over a campaign donation. And even though out of 21 corruption scandals during the ANC's 25 years in office, just one senior party figure has been brought to account in terms of going to jail. How can anyone have confidence in the current ANC government to clean things up when only one person went to prison?
I think you have seen the actions of the president, how he has dealt with the issues of strengthening the institutions of governance, strengthening in particular the justice system, bringing in people who are going to act differently, people who are going to have the courage and to do things focused on correcting what has been wrong in the system.
Just on that one person who was sent to prison, this was the ANC's former chief whip, Tony Yengeni, who was sent to jail for fraud. I believe you accompanied him to the prison gates. How is that not putting your party and your alliances above the interests of Parliament and the country?
I accompanied Comrade Tony because I did not believe in what he was being said to have done. And I accompanied him as a comrade.
So you don't accept the court's verdict in a democratic South Africa?
I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you that I accompanied my comrade, and I don't feel guilty for that.
You don't? Can you tell our viewers what position Tony Yengeni, this ex-convict, was appointed to by the ANC last year?
Position?
Yeah, he was appointed to chair of the Working Group on Corruption. Does that make sense?
One thing
I know. To have a person who went to prison running your working group
wrong
on corruption?
In the ANC political life, we look at things sometimes not exactly the way other people see them.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go to our panel who are waiting to come in. I'm joined by Makosi Kosa, a former ANC MP who resigned from the party in 2017 after calling for President Zuma to step down following corruption allegations. In your view, Makosi, and you were there for a lot of this period, did the ANC fail to hold President Zuma to account? Did the Speaker fail to hold the then President to account, in your view?
Of course, yes. I think they did fail to hold him to account. And in fact, some of us that were speaking out against what we saw as an attack on the Constitution and on the social contract were persecuted. And especially Baleka is somebody that I held in high esteem as somebody who molded me as a young person, and as a feminist, I expected that I ought to have received some kind of support from her. So from that point of view, I honestly do think that in terms of injudiciousness, leadership injudiciousness, I think they have to prove themselves if they are to be believed.
Did you fail to give Makosi Kosa the support she needed? Did you let her down?
I didn't let her down. She and I had a quick exchange outside just to agree that we have stuff to catch up on. And we will do that.
Okay. I mean, I'm all for you catching up. But just for the purposes of the people watching around the world and in this room, do you want to deal with the point she made, that you let her down as a feminist, as an MP trying to hold the president accountable? You weren't there to back her up.
I was there to back her up when she needed security. I made sure that we should look into the issues of what kind of support Parliament had to ensure she had. And we dealt with that very fairly, very focusedly.
Okay. Xolani Kala is the executive chairman of South African Business Abroad, a member of the ANC. Do you think people have faith in the ANC to deal with this corruption issue that's been festering on their watch, especially given the current president has his own campaign donation issues going on?
Well, look, South Africans have a huge faith in the African National Congress. You must remember that we inherited a situation where we have an infrastructure that was not capable to assist our people. Hospitals were only designed for the privileged. The majority of black people were unable to attend hospital. If you are going to universities, they were not there catering for black people. So with all that, the government of the ANC have done so much for the South African people. It is for that reason alone that they keep voting for them.
Yes.
But I must add something else here. The fact that I'm having this privilege to have this dialogue, discussion with you in United Kingdom, it is also that the government of the ANC, we were not allowed as black people to be able to sit here and talk freely. Yeah. It was a criminal offense for me to be here. Okay. The last thing I wanted to say, it comes to the corruption issue.
Very briefly.
When it happens in Africa, we label it as corruption. But it happens here in the House of Commons. MPs are claiming 2 houses, and we call it a scandal.
Okay.
But when it's in Africa, it's corruption. So let's label these things as it is.
Fair point. A very fair point. Let me bring in Andrew Feinstein, who's another former ANC MP who resigned back in 2001. He's author of After the Party, A Personal Journey Inside the ANC. He's now director of Corruption Watch UK. Andrew, you said you've left the ANC because the government at the time refused to investigate corruption properly. How bad has the corruption issue become for the South African government, not just under Thabo Mbeki, but Jacob Zuma and now Cyril Ramaphosa?
First of all, Mehdi, I think that Xolani's point is very well taken. I think that we mustn't lose sight of what has been done in 25 years of democracy, nor lose sight of the fact that what we inherited was a systemically corrupt system.
Yeah.
The biggest problem has been, however, that our own leadership, including Comrade Mbete, who's been a very important leader of our liberation struggle and of our democratic era, have not been prepared to call out colleagues in leadership who have engaged in corruption. And that started all those years back with the arms deal that I tried to investigate, in which South Africa spent $10 billion on weapons that we neither needed nor barely used. And the primary reason that was done is because around $300 million of bribes were paid. And unfortunately, then President Thabo Mbeki was prepared to undermine our institutions of democracy, including Parliament, that he and many others had sacrificed so much to bring about in order to cover up corruption.
Okay.
If that had been stopped then, I don't think we would have gone on to the state capture crisis, the Nkandla crisis.
So let me put that point to you. Did you never feel the need to call out Thabo Mbeki or Jacob Zuma, or did you just feel you couldn't? You were in the big six in the leadership of the party.
You know, there is a tendency to be in a hurry for things to be done, positions to be taken against people before the actual investigation has been done.
But you're acting like this has just popped up now. As these things were happening, you were being criticized.
You don't just get a report from someone and they declare whatever they say, whatever they believe you must do, and you just rush off and do it. You've got to apply your own mind into whatever people are saying.
Okay.
Right?
Andrew's desperate to come back in. Very briefly, Andrew.
These are constitutional bodies. There was a report from the Auditor General about corruption in the arms deal in 2000. Parliament decided unanimously to conduct a multi-agency investigation into it. It was the leadership of the ANC that stopped that investigation because leadership of the ANC were themselves complicit. And this has been the problem time after time. The information has been there from constitutionally mandated bodies.
Another big topic that's in the news, especially right now in South Africa. In recent months, your country's seen an increase in violent xenophobic attacks. Foreign-owned shops ransacked, protests and chants of foreigners must go back to where they've come from. How worried are you about this rise in violent racism?
We are very worried. And there have been statements not only from the president himself, both in South Africa and in neighboring countries. For instance, when he went to President Mugabe's funeral, he took the opportunity to apologize and put a perspective on what had happened. It was not only foreign nationals that were killed. Many South Africans were also victimized in that public violence. Our Minister of International Relations has actually been having a meeting with all embassies or ambassadors.
I mean, you say that you're worried, you say the president's worried, and yet ANC ministers have kind of helped escalate this crisis. You have the Deputy Minister of Police a couple of years ago saying foreigners have taken over the city centres in Johannesburg. He said, we fought for this land, we cannot surrender it to foreign nationals. The then Health Minister blamed overcrowded hospitals and diseases on foreigners. This is the kind of far-right xenophobic rhetoric that we see in other parts of the world leading to violence. This is not helpful.
We know recently at a meeting we had as the National Executive Committee led by the President and the top 6, with all our branches in Johannesburg, discussed this issue. And we took a leadership position that said we must correct whoever is involved in criminal activity.
So you say it went out to branch leaders. Did the ANC Premier of Gauteng, David Makura, did he not get the memo? Because he said this year, some specific crimes are committed by specific nationalities. Drugs, there are specific nationalities. How do we have so many drug dens that are operated by Nigerians? Is that helpful rhetoric when people are being attacked?
It's not helpful, but it's also true.
It's true, what's true?
In certain cases, people have been found to be guilty of running drug businesses. Some Nigerians
and literally
and
10 seconds ago, you said there are many South Africans as well. So I'm confused. I'm confused where you stand. On the one hand, you're saying we shouldn't single them out. On the other hand, you're saying it's true what he says when he singles them out.
It is true. When it's true, it's true. But I do condemn a statement that makes it sound like all Nigerians are doing all the criminality there is in Johannesburg, when in fact we ourselves are also involved.
Because how worried are you?
The truth about what is currently happening is that you have a chronically corrupt police service. If you know that there are people that are drug trafficking or they are doing something, why are you not arresting them? Because that is a crime. But to attribute that to a specific nationality, it is xenophobic. Because you are basically inciting the communities to rise against foreigners. Because they will start looking at foreigners as the people that are bringing in drugs, when that drug trafficking is happening in collusion with the police.
Yes. And Kolani, do you agree with that, disagree with that?
Well, I must take this opportunity once again. My president have done this in South Africa, and I think the guests here have done that today, to apologize even to any other ordinary African here or relative with an African heritage, to apologize on behalf of the South Africans in the diaspora of what have happened. But when there's a criminal elements, let's be able to point them up.
By race, nationality.
I didn't say that.
I mean,
if somebody have done criminal activities,
with respect,
let that individual be
I need to
arrested.
jump in here. When former President Thabo Mbeki said in September, the truth of the matter is that there are Nigerian criminals who are involved in drug dealing, and that's true. There is no South African that goes around chasing Nigerians because they are Nigerians. Is that not denialism of the problem by a former president?
Let me give you more information.
Hold on, do you agree with that statement?
No, I have to give you what I know. The president have said what he have said, but statistics and the report says to us now, 16 people have passed away on the recent incident in South Africa. Out of the 16, there's no one from Nigeria. 14 are South African, 1 is from Mali. Why are we not talking about that as facts?
Let's put that. Let me bring in Andrew Feinstein. It's not a problem. There's no issue with the Nigerians being killed.
The first is that a key root of this problem are the levels of economic inequality that you mentioned in South Africa. And these have to be addressed. These have to be addressed by our leadership. The second problem is a lack of accountability of leaders when they make statements, like you mentioned, from the Premier of the Gauteng province. That is completely unacceptable. That is the language of Trump and Farage. That is not the language that should be coming from the leadership of a liberation movement with a proud tradition and history of the African National Congress.
Do you agree with that? Do you think the ANC leadership should stop using the language of Trump and Farage?
Those are his words.
And I'm asking you if you agree with them. Is it xenophobic? It is, isn't it?
It is. If it is
People in your party are
focused-
guilty of xenophobia.
Some people, not all,
Senior people.
some,
Some senior people.
yes.
Okay, I'm glad we can agree on that. On that note, it's time for a break after a very lively first half.